by the desire of this person for constant sense gratification. So, especially in a marriage, if the husband uses the wife as an object of sense gratification, that doesn't make the wife very happy. You know, someone might think, oh, she should be happy because he's giving her sex. But no, by the way, uh, usually wives that are in situations like that, they take contraceptives because you can be pregnant all the time by a husband who's always engaged, who always wants to have sexual unions. So you end up committing one sin after another because of those type of illicit desires. And then there's contraception, and there's abortion, and there's all these different things nowadays to so-called help a wife not get pregnant. But that's not a solution. The solution is not to engage in, let's say, illicit activities. One can be engaged in illicit activities being married. It's not just people that are not married are engaged in illicit activities. Married people can be engaged in illicit activities also. So uh, learning self-control basically is what we learn in Krishna consciousness. If you join Krishna consciousness, you learn to be self-controlled. You learn to go to sleep at a certain time, wake up at a certain time, bathe regularly, chant your rounds and come to the temple, do service, this thing and that thing. It's all to keep ourselves engaged in the mode of goodness and always thinking about Krishna and eventually come to transcendental goodness where we never forget Krishna. And then we're peaceful. But if we're not able to control our mind and senses, we'll always be agitated. And that agitation causes a lot of misery for uh, someone who may be married and for someone who has friends or whatever, family members. They're always agitated. And eventually people realize that and they don't associate with them. Okay, so uh, DT is appealing to her husband for sex. Prabhupada says, it was not exactly that she was afflicted by sex desires, but she desired sons. Okay, so that means she wasn't interested in using any contraceptives and things like that. She actually wanted to have a son or sons. Since she had no sons, she felt poorer than her co-wives. Therefore, Kashyapa was supposed to satisfy his bona fide wife. Text 12, chapter 3, I'm sorry, Canto 3, chapter 14, text number 12. A woman is honored in the world by the benediction of her husband, and a husband like you will become famous by having children because you are meant for the expansion of living entities. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to Rishabhadeva, one should not become a father or mother unless one is confident that he can beget children who he can deliver from the clutches of birth and death. Human life is the only opportunity to get out of the material scene, which is full of the miseries of birth, death, old age, and diseases. Every human being should be given the opportunity to take advantage of his human form of life, and a father like Kashyapa is supposed to beget good children for the purpose of liberation. Well, this is something that, people should, put it, in their house, to remind them what is the real purpose of human life. If you're going to have children, then you should follow the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. And it says here, according to Rishabhadeva, who's a great saint, pure devotee. One should not become a father or mother unless one is confident that he can beget children whom he can deliver from the clutches of birth and death. Just having children is not, and not being able to teach them and train them to be good devotees is actually a losing proposition. Why? Well, there are many examples of this, but one very stark example of it is there was a family recently that purchased that gave their son, husband and wife, gave their son a gun on his 15th birthday. And what did he do? Right away, he went and killed somebody. It was like unbelievable. And the son is in trouble, and the parents are in trouble also, you see. Because that's, why would they do such a thing like that? A 15-year-old boy, you give him a gun, what's he going to do with it? And therefore, he did the unthinkable. He went and killed somebody right away. It happened right away. A day or two after he got this present of a gun on his 15th birthday, he went and shot someone and killed him. Now, not only the boy is in trouble, the parents are in trouble. Because there's a dead person. So it's very serious. And so the parents are accomplices to the death. So we have to, have common sense. A 15-year-old boy should not be given a gun. And unless it's like a toy gun, that's different. But a real gun, there's a lot of responsibility that goes when you have a real gun with real ammunition. And that's what they gave the boy, a real gun with real ammunition, but no, let's say, proper training. And the boy went right away and killed somebody. So here it says, text 12, a woman is honored in the world by the benediction of her husband. And a husband like you will become famous by having children, because you are meant for the expansion of living entities. Yeah, well, Kashyapa Muni is meant to have a lot of children. Why? Because he's a Prajapati who's supposed to increase the population of the world by having good children. Right? Now, this having good children, there's a science to it. It all depends on the consciousness of the parents at the moment of conception. If their consciousness is only based on lust, then the child that's born will be lusty or ignorant, depending on. So therefore, the contraception or the birth, the making of a child, or the conception of a child, is not based so much on the physical activity of doing it, but it's based more on the consciousness of the parents at the moment of conception. Now, you don't see anything happening until the child is born, and then the child starts to grow, but then you'll see soon, after maybe 5 years or 10 years old, child, what kind of child it is. And if it's disturbed and always causing trouble, then you suddenly realize it's because of the bad consciousness that the father and mother had in the moment of conception. So you see, there are a lot of difficulties in life due to not being able to control the mind and the senses. And conception of a child is a very special thing, and it requires training by of the parents how to conceive a child. But if people just engage in sex and then all of a sudden by accident there's a child, uh, then there's going to be a lot of problems, And unfortunately, many children are born today due to lusty behavior rather than due to their parents being in the mode of goodness. And they cause havoc in society. They cause a lot of trouble because they are not properly trained. So according to Rishabhadev, one should not become a father and mother unless one is confident that he can beget children whom he can deliver from the clutches of birth and death. Human life is the only opportunity to get out of the material scene, which is full of miseries of birth, death, old age, and disease. Every human being should be given the opportunity to take advantage of his human form of life, and a father like Kasyapa is supposed to beget good children for the purpose of liberation. Well, this is where good education comes in. We're reading the Srimad Bhagavatam. Why? Because it's good education. Because it teaches us what's right and what's wrong. And it teaches us all the different levels of what it means to be right and all the different levels of being wrong. So, when Prabhupada says one should not become a father or mother unless one is confident that he or she can beget children whom he can deliver from the clutches of birth and death. Well, how do you do that? You would have to teach the child to be Krishna conscious. And you would have to conceive the child in Krishna consciousness. So traditionally there was the Bhagavadam sanskar before trying to have a child, where the husband and wife would engage in very strict tapasya to have before they would attempt to have a child. Now, fast forward till today, that ceremony, Bhagavadam samskar, before conception is usually not done. Therefore, what Prabhupada recommended was before a husband and wife try and have a child, they should chant 50 rounds, 50 rounds, let's say. If it takes you like 2 hours to chant 16 rounds, it would take what? At least 6 hours, let's say, to chant more to chant 50 rounds, right? So it's a big responsibility. Of course, people usually don't think in those ways. So therefore, traditionally, to avoid accidents, let's say accidents, husband and wife would traditionally not sleep together at night. They would be in separate rooms. Normally, before there was the seminal family, so the women would sleep in one place and the men would sleep in another place, right? They wouldn't sleep together. And if there was a desire to have children, the husband and wife would have a private place to do that, but after that there would be separation. Not that they're divorced or anything like that, but the men would sleep with the men and the women would sleep with the women. In previous times, because there was the seminal family that was there. Well, today you don't always have a big family living together, but still, sleeping together in one bed is not a good idea. It's not a good idea. Husband and wife should sleep separately, and have a peaceful sleep. Okay, so in this verse it says that the human life is the only opportunity to get out of the material scene, which is full of the miseries of birth, death, old age, and disease. Every human being should be given the opportunity to take advantage of his human form of life. And a father like Kashyapa is supposed to beget good children for the purpose of liberation. So this is explaining more or less the purpose of the human life. It is to become free of the miseries of birth, death, old age, and disease, and go back to Godhood. Is this being taught anywhere? Not much, right? I mean, and most things like marriage and things like that, they're like silly, like and like when you get married, at one point the wife stands on a chair and with her back to the people, and then she throws a bunch of flowers, a bunch of tied together over her head, and the ladies try and catch that. The ladies that are not married trying to catch that. Yeah, silly things like this are happening in the marriage, and then sometimes when the family of the husband comes to visit the family of the wife before they're married, and before the marriage ceremony, the family, the husband they have to steal something in the house of the wife. Is that right?
Yes.
So all these silly things are happening. And before you get married, or in the period of the marriage, and the marriages sometimes, it can take months to happen. There's so many different rituals that you have to perform usually, and well, the rituals are not bad, but the whole idea is to be able to control your senses, and to have a life of goodness, being in the mood of goodness. But if in the marriage, you have champagne and liquor, and everyone's, I remember once when I was a kid, I went to a New Year's Eve party, but that party was like, a big family affair. There were like, a couple hundred people. They were all families, and children were there also. And at the beginning of the evening of New Year's Eve, everyone was dressed nicely, and there were all these tables, everything was clean, and everything was, like everyone was dressed nicely, and were talking nicely and so forth. But by the end of the night, people were drunk, they were throwing up. Some of them had to be taken to the hospital. There was a fight because they were all drinking and acting like crazy. And I was a kid. I was like maybe not even 10 years old at that time. And I saw that, I was thinking to myself, it's interesting. How, there was a fight. Someone was, they had the head on the back of a table or something, throwing up. And somebody had to go to the hospital. And this was called, celebrating.
Family.
Huh?
Oh, everybody's a family.
Well, it was, not just a family, it was a lot of people there. All the families were there for celebrating New Year's Eve, But so, you see, a celebration is not when you all get drunk and you go to hospital. That's definitely not a celebration. A celebration is when you celebrate the fact that you have a relationship with Krishna and you glorify Krishna, right? It has nothing to do with champagne and whiskey and all that stuff, because it's all in the mode of ignorance. But the mode of ignorance, lust and ignorance, almost everyone in Kali Yuga is controlled by the modes of lust and ignorance. So you can expect a lot of mishaps to happen the best thing is to become a devotee and live in the mode of goodness and eventually transcendental goodness. Then you're going to avoid a lot of problems in life. Okay, so a woman is honored in the world by the benediction of her husband. Well, that's a way of saying by the children that she has. And a husband like you will become famous by having children because you are meant for the expansion of living entities. Purport. According to Rishabhadeva, one should not become a father or mother unless one's confident that he can beget children whom he can deliver from the clutches of birth and death. Now, is this something that people talk about when they get married? No, don't talk about this. They talk about, how much money you have and all kinds of nonsense things. But this is serious. You should, in other words, you should be confident, the husband and wife should be confident that they can beget children who they can deliver from the clutches of birth and death. Human life is the only opportunity to get out of the material scene, which is full of miseries of birth, death, old age, and disease. Now, are children being taught this? No, they're not being taught this, and because of that, they're being, put into ignorance by their own family. Every human being should be given the opportunity to take advantage of his human form of life. What does that mean? Well, you can only be liberated from the cycle of birth and death in the human form of life. And if you use the human form of life for sense gratification your whole life, then you miss the opportunity of going back to Godhead and the whole purpose of having a human body. That means that in the next life you won't have a human body. And the father, like Kashyapa, is supposed to, notice he's saying supposed to, beget good children for the purpose of liberation. So, this is called education. We're being educated right now, is it? And this is the type of real education. Real education is not, how to make money and how to have, big houses and big cars and big this and big that. It's this. It's how to have, how to understand what is the real purpose of human life. Human life, it says here, is the only opportunity to get out of the material scene, which is full of the miseries of birth, death, old age, and diseases. Now, I never learned that when I was a kid. My parents never told me that. I didn't know that until I was like 28, 30 years old. I started, becoming a devotee and reading these things. I had no idea that that was the purpose of human life. This is how poor we are psychologically in this age of Kali. They don't teach any of this in school, that's for sure. Every human being should be given the opportunity to take advantage of his human form of life. Well, no one explained to me. My father never explained to me. My mother never explained to me what it means to have a human form of life. I didn't know. You go through life without ever knowing what is the purpose of the human form of life. It's a very dangerous way of living. And the father, like Kashyapa, is supposed to beget good children for the purpose of liberation. So there's a way to have good children. It all depends on the husband and wife's consciousness at the moment of conception and how to build that consciousness to be in the right place at the moment of conception. Well, that's based on chanting Hare Krishna, following the regulative principles, and preparing yourself. There's a whole preparation of husband and wife before they try and conceive a child. It's not that all the ceremonies start after the child is born. The ceremony starts before the child is born. It's called Bhagavadam samskar. Now, if you can't do the whole thing of governor samskar, which is not usually done now, then it's chanting a lot of mantras, the Hare Krishna mantra, before even attempting to conceive a child. You have to prepare yourself. You have to prepare your mind and your senses for having for God to give you a good child. And this is something that's not taught normally. And any, I don't know. You ever no. No. That's why it's good to read Srimad Bhagavatam rather than read all these junk books that they have nowadays. Prabhupada once spoke about the books about sex. He said, you don't really need to read a book about sex, but you need to read a book about how to control sex, yes. But you don't need a book about having sex. What you need is how to control it and how to use it in Krishna's service. In days long ago, this is like verse number 13, right? In days long ago, our father, the most opulent Daksha, who was affectionate to his daughters, asked each of us separately whom we would prefer to select as our husband. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It appears from this verse that free selection of a husband was allowed by the father, but not by free association. In other words, they didn't let the daughter go out on dates with the different people and so she could find out who she wants to marry. But she would hear about chivalrous men. Why? Because there were always these different tests to see about, the power and the courage of men. And people would talk about, oh, so and so, they did this, they did that. And then young girls would want to marry someone who was very chivalrous and powerful and was a good person, also would follow the principles of Vedic Dharma. So they wouldn't go out on dates, but they would hear about men who were able to control their senses and they were good devotees and at the same time very, very, let's say, powerful. Why? You become powerful by controlling your activities and engaging always in Krishna consciousness. And instead of losing your sperm, you raise the sperm to the brain. You fecundate the brain. And then you have this very sharp and powerful mental acuity by which you can make good decisions and you have self-control and so forth. Now, how do you do that? Well, there's no book that explains how to raise your sperm to your brain. But if you maintain, especially kids should be taught to remain chaste before marriage. It's very important. And I don't know if they don't. I don't know. They teach that in school. They don't teach them, remaining chaste. They don't talk about those things, right? But the family should talk about things if they don't talk about it in school. Like most kids, they get corrupted when they get to be 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and the most formative, let's say, years are like 14 years old to 20 years old. That's when you really, a kid starts to really try and understand the world, try and understand who they are, what they want to be, and so forth. And if they're exposed only to nonsense, like for example, today, if you look at the music and the songs that are popular, right? Whether it's Hindi songs or whether it's American songs, it's all about love, you know. But what kind of love? It's all love in the mode of ignorance, and with the subtitles that are always suggesting sex. So it's very difficult for young people to be educated properly with this type of propaganda for sense gratification that's omnipotent. It's all over the place. In the television, in the books, in schools, and the cell phones, everywhere. The nuances of different types of, let's say, sense gratification are everywhere. And therefore, it's a dangerous society today, or dangerous culture, let's put it like that. Okay. So, verse 14. Our well-wishing father, Daksha, after knowing our intentions, handed over 13 of his daughters unto you, and since then we have all been faithful. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Generally, the daughters were too shy to express their opinions before their father, but the father would accept the daughter's intentions through someone else, such as the grandmother, to whom the grandchildren had free access. King Daksha collected the opinions of his daughters and thus handed over 13 to Kashyapa. Every one of Diti's sisters was a mother of children. Therefore, since she was equally faithful to the same husband, why should she remain without children? Well, I remember once when I was a kid, uh, some relatives came to the house, and usually the men were with the men, the women were with the women, and I was a little boy, so I was sitting near my father when he was talking to some other gentleman, and they were talking about cigarettes and smoking, right? So while they were talking about cigarettes and smoking, I sort of burst into the conversation and expressed something about cigarettes, right? And they both looked at me. And my father gave me a real hard, smack. He said, what, first of all, he said, you shouldn't interrupt us when we're talking. He said, and secondly, he said, how do you know about this? Right? Are you smoking? And it taught me a lesson, I shouldn't interrupt, elders when they're speaking, but also I shouldn't attempt to say, to show myself to be knowledgeable of something that's really a bad habit.
That will touch their false ego.
Yeah, right. So it was very interesting. They really chastised me, and I remember my father smacking me, saying, you have no right to interrupt us. And how do you know about this? Well, I know about it because you're talking about it, but they didn't look at it like that. My father was a chain smoker, and that because of that he died of lung cancer. Okay. Okay, so text, which one? 15. O lotus side 1, kindly bless me by fulfilling my desire. When someone in distress approaches a great person, his pleas should never go in vain. Purport. Diti knew well that her request might be rejected because of the untimely situation, but she pleaded that when there is an emergency or a distressful condition, there is no consideration of time or situation. Well, that's her opinion. That doesn't mean it's right. That's her opinion. And we see that there is always, in human activities, there's always a correct time and an incorrect time to do things. And These are all things that have to be taught to our children. First of all, we have to follow them, and we have to teach our children. There's certain things that you do at certain hours of the day, and definitely this time of education is not given, unfortunately, but it should be given. And here it's, DT knew well that her request might be rejected because of the untimely situation. Okay, so verse, stop. In the next verse, 16. O hero, hero, Vidura, Diti, being thus afflicted by the contamination of lust, and therefore poor and talkative, was pacified by the son of Marichi in suitable words. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. When a man or woman is afflicted by lust for sex desire, it is to be understood as sinful contamination. Kashyapa was engaged in his spiritual activities, but he did not have sufficient strength to refuse his wife, who was thus afflicted. He could have refused her with strong words, expressing impossibility, but he was not as spiritually strong as Vidura. Vidura is addressed here as a hero because no one is stronger in self-control than a devotee of the Lord. It appears that Kashyapa was already inclined to have sexual enjoyment with his wife, and because he was not a strong man, he tried to dissuade her only with pacifying words. No, you could have shouted at us, no, but no, he didn't do that. He said, well, maybe we shouldn't do this, it's not the right time, but then they went and did it. So, that just shows his weakness. So what is strength? The strength means, it's not just physical strength, it's mental strength. You follow regulative principles. That means you have a strong mind, able to do the right things at the right time and not the wrong things at the wrong time. Not the wrong things at any time. But there are right things that you should do at the right time. So this is something that has to be taught. This is something that has to be discussed. And see, we're hearing that here, but you don't hear that in other places. All the books for education of children are not explaining these things. So this is the best education, Srimad Bhagavatam, for everyone, adults and children. Children are able to understand the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not that, oh, they can't understand it too young, or we need to have Srimad Bhagavatam for children and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, maybe you can have Srimad Bhagavatam for children, but children can understand more than you think if they're explained properly. Okay, we'll stop right there. We'll start from verse number 16 tomorrow. Are there any questions?
A lot of insightful
Yeah,
education. Yes.
this is real education. Okay, go for it, Shishira.
Well, thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Any questions?
Hare Krishna, any questions online?
When Maharaj, I used to go in childhood to our village, like during summer vacation time, with our grandmother, and we used to stay there for few weeks and months. So I have seen the same, in the night, all the men were sleeping together, because they have a big family in village, more than 20, 30 people. So they were all sleeping together. We were also sleeping with the men and women separate.
Yeah.
I did not realize the deep meaning at that time, but they were doing all the right thing.
That was the right thing. It's still the right thing.
Yeah,
It's not the wrong. Yeah, because there's a time for everything. There's a time for reproductive activity, and there's a time for but there was separation. Always there was separation traditionally. And and all these things were very good. To keep a peaceful mind, and actually, the fact that you have a large family and everybody's following the rules and regulations, it was very instructive for the kids, very instructive.
Yes. I got the impression at that time, but not the real education, but at least I got the impressions what they were doing.
Just imagine if they also explained to you why they were doing it,
Would have become.
yeah. And those are things, it's usually nowadays, people think, well, when the child gets to be such age, then I'll start talking about what sex is. And when that happens, the parents are shocked, the child already knows all these things. How did you learn all these things? Well, they just pick it up because it's all over the culture. So it's better to educate a child through Srimad Bhagavatam, so they learn correctly all these things. Otherwise, they learn it from other kids in school. It's not a good idea. Not a good idea at all. And to send them to a school where they're going to be exposed to such kids that talk about these things, it's not good. So we have to think, about the education of our children, In other words, in America, they call it, they teach the kids about the birds and the bees. But by the time they think about doing that, they find out the kid already knows. How did the kid know? Well, watching movies and reading books and listening to rock music and all that stuff. And it's all usually about sex in one way or other. So they learn about all of that way before the parents want to teach them about the birds and the bees. So it's better to not let your kids have powerful weapons of cultural destruction. Cell phones, television, all these things are powerful weapons by which nonsense people can reach the mind of your child. And some of the worst people in the world on the internet, they're on the television, even television programs for children. Oftentimes, the people that are acting out, they have these kid programs in the morning. But the people who are, people that are speaking and so-called acting and so forth, they're usually really bad people, right? And the parents, just turn on television and they're doing their work, and the kids watching television for hours in the association of bad people, So they should not do that. They should not have anything that will give access to the child of bad association, whether it's through the television, whether it's through the cell phone, whether it's through the school. You have to protect the child from all this bad association. Otherwise, you're going to be surprised what they've learned without you knowing it, and it's going to form them more than anything that you've ever tried to teach your child. Harivilas. All glories to Sri
Prabhupada ki jai. Gurudev. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, the most dangerous